Welcome back. Another wonderful day of Lightroom. This is actually Lightroom Classic. So if you are confused about what they are, there are two different versions of Lightroom currently available. Right now we're going to be using Lightroom Classic. If you have Lightroom, then this is not for you. There will be another tutorial on my channel about Lightroom. You can find the link in my description. But right now, just make sure you have Lightroom Classic. If not, you can download it. I think it comes with most Adobe Cloud software programs that or software licenses you might have. So let's get right into it. First things first, when you open it up, you're going to see basically this. I have this right here which shows you the keys I'm using, and this is going to help you basically see what exactly I'm pushing when we have the shift button down here, and we have I'm on Mac, so I have command, which is right here. For Windows users it would be control, and in the description I have a list of all the different shortcuts I'm going to show you, and they will be using CTRL, which is control, listed, which on Mac is just command. That's it, back and forth, command and control. So just to get started, the first thing you want to do is import some photos, or just one photo at least. If you have nothing down here, that's totally fine. What you do is go to the very top of Lightroom and you click on the file, and this drops down. You can't see the file, but this file, edit, library, photo, etc. You're going to have import. So there's Shift Command I or Shift Control I on Windows, and it will open up a box that looks just like this. And you can see that there is nothing here right now. You can scroll inside your hard drive, all the different file folders you have for the photo, or what I usually do, which is much quicker, is I already know where it is. All I do is drag it in and it automatically adds it. Now it goes right to the folder that it's located in, which is right here. And any other photos in here you can also add. I'm just going to add one, so I'm going to select just this one, and once that's done, on the bottom right we have the import. You just click import. Now when you open up Lightroom, this photo will always be there, and it will always be in the library in the bottom. And just in case you can't see it here, it goes away, you import another folder over time. It doesn't list everything right away. If you want to find it, you can click here. It says previous imports. For me, it might show all photographs or quick selections or quick collection for you. I'm on previous. So if you click all photographs, it will list every single photograph you have, and you can go back and forth between those. So right here, all I have right now is my previous, which is this current folder and this photo. Now it's pretty small because right now I'm in the library function. Right here up on the tabs, I have library, develop, map, and so on. You won't really use these up here. The most important thing is the develop function and the library function, which shows you all the current imports of this session. Lightroom saves photos into what's called metadata, which is linked to the photo file itself. So if you change the name of the photo, the original file photo, if I change the name from this pixels, etc., then it will not be able to link the metadata later on. You might have to relink it or just rename it back to the original. So I suggest once you have the photo into Lightroom and you do a bunch of editing, don't change the name. It's going to mess some things up, unless Adobe changes. But from what I remember, it's good practice just to keep it the way it is. I'm using these photos from pexels.com, which is a copyright-free website for photos and even videos. It's great, free sign up, free download for most things, and you can find some great images that might be useful to you. You can use any photo you want. I'm going to use this one, which I'll also use in the other Lightroom basic navigation and usage videos I'll be doing. So once you have it imported, again, long story short, click on develop. You can also just double click on the photo down here or here, and it goes into the develop mode. Now I'm going to go back here and just double click here, right, because the library is all set up, and we have my photo, which has been changed a bit. Now what I'm going to do is, this is already saved before because I was messing around as I was getting ready for the video, and this is the first quick tip, is that once you have some things, and let's say you mess around a whole bunch, you change on the right hand side or all the options, you can scroll down with your mouse wheel. A bit laggy right now, and you can do different stuff here. But if you have stuff you don't like, an easy tip is just to find the title and double click it. Double click each title and it will reset to the default of Lightroom. I'm going to go through here and just double click, and it's going back to where the default should have been. So anything that was changed is defaulting back. Now you have all these other dialog boxes you can drop down. Right now, we're going to stay in here for the general sense. This is a further video, but what we're going to do is learn how to navigate Lightroom. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our full screen mode. This is not full screen like any other program. If you push F on your keyboard, it switches to the full screen view of the photo, because sometimes you want to lose all these sidebars, all these tabs, and you want to see just the photo for what it is, exactly as it currently has been edited into, and you get full screen. The next thing you have is L, which is going to be lights out mode. So if you push L, it'll go half lights out to start, push it again, and it will go full lights out. Everything stays the same. You can see my keys are right here. It looks like a pause sign, but it's actually two L's. So we have a black box around it, exactly as Lightroom is. If I moved Lightroom a bit in my window here, then this wouldn't change. But either way, you can see clear view of just the photo. And full screen also, again, is kind of similar. So it depends on your preferences, back and forth. Next, we have a very important thing called grid mode. This is going to show you anything in your library. So it's going to jump back to library, and you can go between different photos if you have any else imported currently. Or if you don't want to use that, you just bottom out here on the bottom bar, and you have a grid of or a lineup of all the current imports. The next shortcut is going to be E, and E is going to switch to what's called normal mode. And this kind of just closes things, goes back to what the default is for toolbars and everything else. Doesn't change the actual settings. It just goes back to where you expect things to be. Now, while we're here under library, for those that are just starting out with photo editing and especially with Lightroom editing, Lightroom has a lot of built-in tools that are really good, and they have different scenarios, different needs, depending on what you want. So in library, push E as well, which goes back to normal mode. Under quick develop, drop that down if it's not there. You have the save presets, you have other things too. These are built into Lightroom, and you have things like color. I don't know if you can see this or not. It's dropping out to a different view. I'm sorry about that. Color, which is natural, and it will change the actual coloring of the photo, and you can mess around on your own and see these kind of things. These are presets built into Lightroom, and you can, maybe one of these will be perfect just for you, and that would be great because it will save you a lot of time. So try those out on your own. I'm going to Command Z or Control Z back into the default. Next, we have the tab button on your keyboard, and that's going to remove all the panels on the sides. So again, it's kind of like L, but a little bit different. Everyone has their own preferences. Next, we're going to have T, the letter T, which is going to show and hide the toolbar. And what that means is down at the bottom here. Just the toolbar goes away, comes back. Some people don't even need it because they know the shortcuts. This toolbar is part of what we're coming up to in a minute. So I'll leave it on. Next, we're going to have I, the letter I, and you see the details of the photo. So there's the title, there's the date, and there is the size. So toggle through I and you get that. Next, we have Control and plus and minus or Command on Mac, and this goes for anything in Photoshop, Adobe. We have zoom in and zoom out. It typically zooms into where your mouse is. So if I zoom in, once it's there, it's not perfect, but that's the basic idea. Put my mouse down here. No, never mind. I'm totally wrong about that. What's going to happen here is the next step is if you are zoomed in, you can't do this when you're fully zoomed out because there's nowhere else to move. But if you zoom in, you're going to see that there's a hand here I can move around. Let's say I have a tool selected. Now, when I click the tool, something happens. But if I don't want that and I want to move around while I'm zoomed in, you hold down the space button. This goes for Photoshop as well. Hold down the space bar and then click and drag. Click the mouse and drag around. And this way, you can actually move around the photo without doing anything with a current active tool. And that's basically it. Now, while tools are active, The next step is just push escape. Push escape will cancel any active tools. This one's active. You can see the new mouse icon. This is push escape. It goes back to this. Next tool, active, escape. So that's just another quick tip. Pushing escape cancels any current tool that's being active. Doesn't change any settings. It just removes that tool. Next, we have F2, which will rename the photo. This is similar to I, but you can actually rename the photo itself. I'm not going to do that. But the good thing about this is that if you do it within Lightroom, it's going to actually change it, and the association will not get messed up. Unlike what I said earlier, if you change it inside the folder where you got it from, this will actually keep that association with Lightroom. Get rid of that, I. Next, we have Control and E. Now, I'm not going to do this, but if I push Control E, a box will pop up that says Edit In or Edit With. You can edit in Photoshop. So if you have Photoshop, which if you have Lightroom, you probably do have Photoshop, then you just push Control or Command E, and you can edit into Photoshop. So it sends it into Photoshop, and the association still remains between the two. Now you have a couple options here. You can edit the original photo, which is the one in the file. Anything I change, just a heads up, in Lightroom does not actually change the original file. That's how Lightroom works. It works again with metadata, which is on top. So it's an extra layer. And you have to export, which we'll talk about later on. Export that Lightroom file, which creates a new photo. So you have the original still plus the Lightroom version. So again, Command E, and I have edit a copy, which is a different version of this, or edit with the current preset. So if I change stuff in my develop section, or even in the library, the presets that Lightroom has, they will go into Photoshop. So you can't change them in Photoshop in the same aspect in the same way, but you can actually just keep the current settings and it becomes a new thing to change into Photoshop. Okay, next up we have Command or Control, and this is, for me, it's above my Enter button, but it's the brackets. Not the rounded brackets, not the rounded with the little nubs. I don't know what they're called, but the square brackets, Command, Control, and square brackets. And you can see on, it goes away. If I hold it down, then right here, this bracket. And the other one, the opposite side, this rotates the photo around. So square brackets and Command Control are rotated around. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes your phone will change its horizontal vertical aspect ratio, and it will change the actual photo orientation in the file itself. You could just fix that here. Next up, so this is basic navigation. Next up, we're going to get adjustments, and this is really important to be in the develop tab. So if you're in library, just go back to develop and click that. So here we go. Again, escape is important because this is where all the tools are for changing things in Lightroom. Command or Control Z always undoes this, the undo function. You can always go up to Edit beside File and Undo, but Command Z, Control Z is the quick way of doing it. I think most people know this from just using any Microsoft Word or any word processing. Next step is the backslash. And this is a really important function that I use all the time. If you look up here on the right hand side, it says before and after. What you're seeing here is the original file. And if I click that again, just this backslash button, then it has the after, so the current version. So this is with a few different edits from messing around earlier and the original before. So it will always show you the original import, before and after. Next up, we have the Y button, and there's a few different versions of this. This is also before and after, but it's a in the middle, half and half. So before and after. Same idea. Next, we have Shift and Y, and Shift plus Y is the same idea, but instead of having half and half on the same photo, now we have doubles, and it's back and forth, before and after. And that's basically it for befores and after. I usually use just the backslash myself. Next up, we have J. J is an important tool that I love, and I know that probably most people love it as well. And if you look up here on this spectrum chart, you have push J and these two little arrows that have blocks around them. What that is doing is that you can't see it now, you can kind of see it here, but it will show you the clipping of the white and darks in the photo. So let's say you want to brighten the photo up. I go to exposure and I brighten it up. As I brighten it more and more and more, you can see there's little red marks that pop up here and there. And as I brighten it more and more and more, they really come into view. What this is showing you is where there is so much brightness that Lightroom is saying, you got to change this. This is just overkill here, and it's just too much for anything. Any photo, any print, any resolution. So this is called clipping. Now red is going to be light, and if I go down to the dark side, it usually shows a bit of blue. Let me just go to highlights. Can't see that there. It depends on the photo and the light settings. But blue, there we go, and the blacks. So blue is the darks. So red again, you can see a bit blue and red now, overkill. And again, that's with J. J turns it on, J turns it off. So let me just turn it up all the way. On, off, on, off. Really simple. I usually just keep it on, because if you're good, if you don't have any clipping, you won't even see it. Next step, we have V, Victor, and that's going to convert it to grayscale. Really simple, black and white photo. It's called grayscale professionally because if it was just black and white, it wouldn't have any detail. Most things are just gray. Going back, we have a really great feature, Command or Control and U, and that's called auto tone. Things here in here just adjusted. Let me go back and show you again. Watch over here. If I push, this is the button as well, but Command or Control U, and Lightroom uses its wonderful AI basically to auto tone, auto adjust things that it thinks is the best for the photo. And I'm not quite sure, but I have a hunch that it goes not against your current settings, but against the original photo. This one. The original photo, if you look at it, there's a bit of clipping here as well. So there we go. Let me just Command Z, and I can go back. If you want to click it, just click that right there. Auto tone's the exact same thing. And you're set. We have Control and Shift and then U, and that's going to be auto white balance. Very different from auto tone. Auto white balance. Command Shift and U. So Command U or Control U is auto tone. Command Shift U is auto white balance. Now, let's say you have two photos, two somewhat similar. Maybe they're taken in the same area, but they're different photos, maybe from a different angle. And you work with one photo and it looks amazing. Instead of going through and copying every single little detail in your develop section, every single slider, because trust me, there's a lot of sliders. You drop down all these menus, there's a lot of sliders. An easy way is to copy the settings and just copy them to a different photo. So all you'd have to do is go Command or Control Shift C, and this pops up. And you can, the default is the important ones. Like you can just leave it like this and mess around. If you want to include things like brushes, so your tools up here, or your transform edits where you size the photo and change different things, even the cropping. So let's say you crop the photo, which we'll talk about in a minute. This will copy that. So you hit copy and it copies whatever is here. And then you go to your next photo. Let's say there's one here, double click it. That photo pops up. You go the same idea, Command Shift and V. So Command Shift C is copy, Command Shift V is paste. And that will copy all of these copied settings onto the next photo. So this is a great way. Once you have a photo perfect, you can take the exact same settings and just transfer as many times as you want. A quick hint is that this is only really good if you have a similar setting. So the same photo, the same area was taken with the same camera, the same settings in the camera. It's basically the same thing, just a different angle. That's great. If it's a totally different photo from a different area or a different place in the world, a different artist, a different camera, I wouldn't suggest using that. I suggest going through and just doing it on your own with every single one. So it depends on the actual scenario. Next up, we're going to have how to adjust these just a tiny bit, because this is sometimes a bit much. One way is to double click on the number and you can actually type in 0. Let's say 10. Let's say -10, and it adjusts. Another way is to click it and then use the up and down arrows, and what it does is it adjusts, plus and minus. It adjusts it like this. There's a few different ways. I've never really used that, but it is an option that's available. Double clicking the name resets the default, and just typing in the number that I like is what I typically do. I seem to find it a lot faster. The next step is to use a reset for everything. And this is great because sometimes you've been messing around, you don't like it, want to go back to 0. All you have to do is hit Command or Control, Shift R, and it resets it back to default. Everything goes back to, every single slider, goes back to default. Command Shift R. Well, let's see the next one, white balance. Okay, here we're getting into some tools. So if we push W, you're going to get this popping up. This is where, let's say you want the whole photo to be a bit brighter. You might want to, there's 1,000 ways to do this, but find a bright spot. This is going to be too much. And it adjusts the white balance to whatever you select. Hit W, it adjusts the white balance. So a quick tip, depending on what you want to do, but most commonly, you're going to want to find the centerpiece of your photo. Maybe she'd be over there, maybe she's over here, but the thing that the photo is focusing on, the key statue in the photo, whatever you want to call it, and just the average tone between whatever it is. Let's say her, I would choose her skin tone. That looks a bit good, and it will adjust for that. If you don't like it, go back and pick a different spot. You can then come over here and adjust certain things, but this is what the white balance tool does. I personally don't use it very much. Command Shift R goes back to default, and that's that, white balance. Next one is very common to be used is the cropping tool. Hit the R button and you have this, and cropping is when you're cutting out different edges and resizing things. So if I drag the edge, any edge, even here, I can adjust. I drag the corner, I can adjust the top and the bottom. If I do this and then pull it over, I can adjust the photo like this. Now, one thing that people might not realize is that there's a couple different tricks with this tool. While I'm in the cropping tool, so again, R, I push X and it will switch between landscape and portrait. So let's say I want to take this landscape photo and I'll make it into a portrait. I can do this. I can adjust the portrait as I want, but it's kind of a quick way, instead of dragging, a quick way to adjust. Let's say I put her over here, nice 2/3 rule, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 space grids each side. The 2/3 rule is 2/3 of the photo is either space or focus, space or person you're focusing on. You put her over here, also 2/3, right? There's 2/3 her, 1/3 space. 2/3 her, 1/3 space. You can adjust and make, it's just a standard rule. Everything's different, but there you go. Now I have that. Command R, Control R, back and forth. Let's go back to the original and then zoom out. There we go. Command Shift R, back to default. One last key command today, we have Q, and that is the spot removal tool, and that's this tool right here. These all have commands. If you hover over, it should pop up, spot removal Q. You have red eye, which there is no shortcut. We have the gradual filter, which is M. You can see the shortcuts. It should pop up. Most things do pop up with a brackets and the shortcut key, but this is for the next video. But the spot removal is a common tool we'll use, plus this tool, which is the filter tool. It adds layers and layers and layers of custom filters. Escape, get rid of it. And that's basically where we're at. I mean, it's not that hard to get around Lightroom. It's a very intuitive program. This is Lightroom Classic. The other Lightroom, the current Lightroom, is a lot different. It does similar things, but it's a lot different. So it needs an entirely separate video. So thanks for watching. Subscribe, and I will see you next time.